So chapter 10 gets us into the visualizing proportions. So here we're talking about anything that's a breakdown of parts to a whole. So instead of counts or things like Likert scales, these are always going to be, out of 100% of the data for whatever it is, what is the breakdown? A lot of times you'll see these for things like demographic type variables, like representing like how many people or what proportion of folks are in different departments, or like gender, racial splits, things like that. You'll see them for like political things, and you're showing like the proportion of like Republicans versus Democrats that voted for something, things like that. So basically these can be split to two different things. One is when you are looking at categorical variables as those splits, and that's going to be things like pie charts and the variations from that. And then you're going to be looking at continuous variables, and then those are represented by density plots, as shown on the far right here. And as you can see in this overview, you can have them by themselves or broken up into groups. Okay, so pie charts get a lot of hate in the data viz world. As the book says, data scientists and other stats folks tend to hate on them a lot, and business people tend to like them a lot. So the book made some good cases for why pie charts aren't always terrible. So in data such as this, when the point is to show something like this, the context for this was different parties, like political party type things, where you want to see that the FDP and the SPD together are majority over the CDU/CSU. So the pie chart actually does a really good job of that, whereas the other ones don't. So that is the story that it tells really, really well. But all of them show, all of them show that the yellow piece right there is really, really small. But then you can see that for the pie chart and the stacked, it's easier to see that the black group is larger than the red group, and so on and so forth. So you can see where some of them can be advantageous and some of them are not. So this graph is, or this chart is actually a really good way to kind of suss out, in my data, is this, which one is probably better for the story I'm trying to tell, for the specific data I have, etc. So yeah, some good practices that they've shown here though is all the pieces are labeled as part of the chart. You don't have to look anywhere else for legend or anything like that. The numbers are embedded inside of the colors so that you're not trying to math it, estimating what proportion is in each, and so on and so forth. And you'll notice that even though that these are proportions, they're not always represented as percents. They can be counts, but the weight of them, whether you're in the pie chart or otherwise, will be based on percentages at the end of the day. But then the chapter went into talking about multiple comparisons. And so here, all things are possible. So this is one of the things where you need to start developing the judgment of, is making multiple pie charts a good idea? If I have multiple proportions, should I be using this stacked one? Or should it be the more bar chart style like that. And you can see that data in this particular case, this, I don't even know what you're supposed to be getting out of this, the multiple pie charts. It's extremely hard to read. It really doesn't give us much of anything at all. This one on here, it's visually appealing because of the way that they go down and such. But the comparison side to side, like you can tell that the orange is getting bigger here, and you can tell that the yellow is getting bigger here. But the stuff in the middle, it's really, really kind of hard. It looks like the blue's a little bit smaller there, but it's super hard to tell. Whereas you go over here and you can easily compare between the years for each of the companies. These color choices are a little atrocious in my eyes. Like the yellow, like I would never use a yellow like this without a black border around it. And they were like just really bright, but you get the idea. This one definitely tells a clearer story year to year and company to company. When you're dealing with, so here we got two variables in play, right? We have company and we have the year. So what can be tricky sometimes is for people to figure out which one should be on the axis here, like here where it has company, and which one should be the bars, like this. And that's usually, your decision is going to be based on what is the story, what you're trying to help people see in your data. Because you can flip it back and forth, and they're both technically correct, usually. But this one in particular shows you the trends by years a little bit more, and then you can look at it more to see the companies. If you'd flipped it the other way around, you'd be focusing on each company more than the years, if that makes sense. So it's all what you're trying to draw people's attention to, how you're framing the story. Okay. The one time when it does make a lot of sense to use these type of bars is when you do have just two levels, right? Because we said earlier that the orange is easy to see and the yellow is easy to see, but the stuff in the middle is kind of fuzzy. It's really hard to compare. Here, when there's only two groups, it's really easy to compare across. There's no middle fuzzy ground. So this is a good instance where using that stack style can be done to a really good effect. It looks cool. Like the fact that it's all complete because of proportions, just it's kind of like visually nice. Yeah, so that is a good instance of when it is a nice idea to use these stacked ones. Okay. The rest of the chapter went on talking about these density plots. Again, this is something that I haven't figured out how to use properly in Tableau, but you should be aware of these, know what they look like when they're done well, what they look like when they're not done well, etc. So on the left side, we have the top example of one that is done well. And then on the bottom, one that is not done well. What's the difference between these? So the way that the data kind of flows, oftentimes you want it to be like the largest thing on the bottom and the smallest thing on the top like this. So this is a good instance where it kind of flows like that. Even though this one, these are ordered, so you actually do have to go in an order like that. You can't mix up the order. Like, you know, this one isn't necessarily ordered, you know, like marital status isn't necessarily ordered. So yeah, but like it looks funky because of the way the data is distributed, right? So if the data had happened to, if this data here looked like this, then it'd be a bad choice for a density plot done in this style. right? So the density plots are generally done where it's like light on the top or smaller bars bits on the top. They kind of flow together in the same kind of direction. When they get really random like that, it does tend to be better to break them apart in some way. So you can see that you can do them by counts or by relative proportions. And they do tend to be like if a lot of times these are ordered, continuous variables are ordered like age and stuff like that. So you'll see that these are always done in their orders, whichever side you're looking at there. And then if they're ordered like how health, poor, fair, good, excellent, you would stack these bars going around across in that same order. That makes sense. If it's not ordered, then it doesn't matter as much, but I would just put it as the percent bill. But that one's a little bit more your choice. As you can see here, this isn't really an order, and they've chosen to put it like that. Yeah, so again, I'm figuring out how to do this in Tableau, but these are useful to be able to know and read. Okay, I'm gonna switch over to Tableau for demonstration.